If Jesus responded to narcissistic people this way, you can learn to do the same. Some people can feel like mirrors that never reflect you back. You stand before them hoping to be understood, respected, and genuinely loved. Yet instead of connection, you receive criticism, confusion, silence, or a distorted version of yourself. You give, and they keep taking. You explain your feelings, and somehow your words are turned against you. You are hurt, but they behave as though nothing happened. The moment you finally defend yourself, they suddenly become the wounded one. After enough of this, you may begin questioning everything. You wonder whether you are too sensitive. Maybe you communicated badly. Maybe you are the difficult one. Maybe you should have stayed quiet. But somewhere beneath all that confusion, something inside you keeps saying, this is not love. This is not truth. And this does not reflect the character of Christ. What makes this even more painful is that these people are often not strangers. They may be your spouse, a parent, a close friend, or even someone in a position of spiritual authority. They may know how to speak the language of love, faith, and compassion, while behaving in ways that leave you feeling insignificant, controlled, exploited, or constantly afraid of upsetting them. You find yourself carefully choosing every word because keeping the peace seems more important than telling the truth. That is more than an ordinary disagreement. When manipulation, intimidation, humiliation, and emotional control become repeated patterns, the relationship can become deeply abusive and destructive. But there is something important many people overlook. Jesus encountered people who behaved in remarkably similar ways. We often imagine Jesus only as gentle, patient, and compassionate, and he absolutely was. But his compassion never meant a lack of discernment. Jesus was also courageous, direct, and unwilling to cooperate with hypocrisy or the misuse of power. He encountered proud religious leaders, manipulative people, attention seekers, dishonest individuals, and those who cared more about appearances than truth. Yet he did not become intimidated by them. He did not compromise truth simply to avoid conflict. He did not allow someone else's manipulation to dictate his behavior. Jesus was loving, but he was never a doormat. That distinction matters because many people have been taught that being a good Christian means endlessly tolerating harmful behavior. We hear, turn the other cheek. We hear, love your enemies. We hear warnings about judging others. And sometimes these teachings are misunderstood to mean that we must remain available to people who repeatedly mistreat us. But Jesus never taught us to confuse forgiveness with unlimited access. When you examine the way Jesus dealt with hypocrites, prideful leaders, controlling people, and those who tried to trap him, a very different picture emerges. His approach was intentional. He remained compassionate without becoming controllable. He spoke truth without needing everyone's approval. He recognized deception without becoming consumed by it. And that gives us something practical to learn. First, Jesus understood that not everyone deserved the same level of trust. The Gospel of John contains a powerful statement explaining that Jesus did not entrust himself to everyone because he understood what was inside people. Think about what that means. Jesus could love someone without giving that person unrestricted access to his inner world. He understood human nature. He could see beyond appearances, words, charm, and public behavior. He was not easily impressed by someone simply because they sounded convincing. This is especially important when dealing with narcissistic patterns because manipulation often begins with presentation. Someone may appear charming, generous, spiritual, confident, or incredibly caring. They may know exactly what to say to gain your trust. They may flatter you, tell you what you want to hear, and create an impressive image for everyone watching. But Jesus did not measure character by performance. He looked deeper. He understood that someone's words can sound beautiful while their motives remain completely different. He was not controlled by applause, popularity, or appearances. Even when people admired him, he did not automatically surrender his trust to them. That is a lesson many of us desperately need. Kindness does not require blindness. Grace does not require ignoring patterns. Being compassionate does not mean repeatedly handing your trust to someone who has demonstrated that they will misuse it. There is a difference between loving someone and trusting them. You can forgive someone and still maintain boundaries. You can pray for someone without allowing them unlimited access to your life. You can wish someone well while recognizing that distance is necessary. And you can choose peace without pretending that harmful behavior never happened. Jesus showed us that love and discernment can exist together. So if you have been feeling guilty because you stepped away from someone who continually wounded you, take a moment to reconsider that guilt. Creating healthy distance from destructive behavior is not automatically hatred, bitterness, or a failure to show Christian love. Sometimes wisdom means recognizing what a person's repeated actions are telling you. You do not have to become cold. You do not have to become cruel. You do not have to live suspicious of everyone around you. But you also do not have to ignore reality just because someone uses the right words. Jesus loved deeply, yet he knew whom he could trust. And learning that difference may be one of the most important steps toward protecting your peace, restoring your clarity, and walking in truth again. You can care about someone deeply without giving them control over your peace, your emotional strength, or your identity. Jesus demonstrated this himself. Second, Jesus established boundaries, even when doing so involved people close to him. We sometimes imagine boundaries are necessary only when dealing with obvious enemies, but the boundaries that challenge us most are often the ones we need with people we love. When there is history, family loyalty, or emotional attachment involved, saying enough can feel almost impossible. Jesus understood this tension. In the Gospel of Mark, there is a striking moment when Jesus is inside a packed house teaching and serving people. His family arrives, but they are not necessarily coming to encourage him. They believe something is wrong with him, and apparently think they need to intervene because they believe he has lost his mind. Think about how painful that would have been. Imagine pursuing something you deeply believe God has called you to do, while members of your own family question your judgment, criticize your direction, and attempt to interfere with what you are doing. Jesus could have allowed their reaction to derail him. He could have become defensive. He could have stopped everything to convince them that he was right. He could have allowed family pressure to pull him away from his purpose, but he didn't. When someone told him that his mother and brothers were outside looking for him, Jesus redirected the conversation towards something deeper. He looked at those gathered around him and explained that those who follow God's will are his true spiritual family. This was not about hating or disrespecting his biological family. It was about making his priorities unmistakable. His obedience to God could not be controlled by the expectations, fears, or emotional reactions of other people. That lesson is incredibly important when dealing with unhealthy relationships. You may have a parent who constantly uses guilt to control you. You may have a spouse who turns every boundary into an accusation. You may have a friend who repeatedly crosses lines and then makes you feel guilty for objecting. You may even have someone who uses your faith against you, telling you that being loving means tolerating whatever they do. But Jesus never taught that. A boundary does not mean you have stopped loving someone. A boundary means you have decided that another person's unhealthy behavior will no longer determine how you live. Jesus remained focused on his identity and his assignment. He did not allow guilt to become a leash. He did not permit fear of disappointing others to replace obedience to God. So if someone close to you repeatedly ignores your needs, dismisses your feelings, violates your boundaries, and then uses your love to keep you trapped, remember the example Jesus gave. You are allowed to say, "I love you, but I will not continue participating in this." You can create distance without hatred. You can refuse manipulation without becoming cruel. You can protect your peace without becoming selfish. Sometimes loving someone properly requires refusing to participate in the behavior that is destroying both of you. That is not a rejection of love. It can actually be an expression of truth. Third, Jesus confronted destructive behavior without allowing anger to control him. One of the most powerful things about Jesus was his willingness to confront people who abused their influence. He was not afraid to challenge hypocrisy simply because the people involved were respected, religious, or powerful. Matthew 23 gives us an especially strong example. Jesus openly confronted the teachers of the law and the Pharisees, exposing the contradiction between their public appearance and their private character. He pointed out that they focused heavily on looking righteous while hiding greed, pride, hypocrisy, and self-indulgence underneath the surface. This was not Jesus quietly tolerating toxic leadership. He brought the hidden behavior into the light. The Pharisees were deeply invested in status, recognition, authority, and public approval. They presented themselves as spiritually superior while placing enormous burdens on others. They cared about appearances and control, and they used religious standards as a way to elevate themselves and pressure the people around them. That pattern can look surprisingly familiar today. Some manipulative people use religion, morality, intelligence, status, or even victimhood to maintain control. They create an image that makes everyone else question the person who is actually being harmed. They may appear respectable in public while behaving completely differently behind closed doors. Jesus was not fooled by that performance. But notice something equally important. He did not become consumed by them. He did not spend every moment trying to convince them that he was right. He did not chase them for validation. He did not enter endless circular arguments just to prove himself. When confrontation was necessary, he spoke with clarity and moved forward. That is a powerful model for anyone dealing with narcissistic behavior. You do not have to win every argument. You do not have to make a manipulative person finally understand your perspective. You do not need their permission to know what you experienced. And you do not have to lose control of yourself simply because someone else is behaving irrationally. Jesus could be firm without becoming chaotic. He could be angry without becoming abusive. He could expose wrongdoing without becoming consumed by revenge. There is an important difference between destructive anger and righteous anger. Destructive anger is driven by the desire to punish, humiliate, or wound someone. Righteous anger is motivated by the desire to protect what is right, defend what is vulnerable, and bring deception into the light. Jesus' confrontation was not about getting revenge against the Pharisees. It was about truth. He was exposing what they were doing because their behavior was harming other people. And that distinction matters for you too. If you need to confront someone, do not let their dysfunction pull you into becoming a version of yourself that you do not recognize. You can speak firmly. You can say no. You can identify manipulation. You can walk away. You can protect yourself. And you can do all of that without surrendering your character in the process. The goal is not to become as harsh as the person who hurt you. The goal is to become so grounded in truth that their behavior no longer controls who you become. That is one of the most important lessons we can take from the way Jesus handled difficult people. You do not have to become explosive, hateful, or bitter just because someone has treated you badly. You do not need to respond to manipulation with more manipulation. You do not need to use sarcasm, revenge, or prolonged silence as weapons. But you absolutely can acknowledge when something is wrong. Jesus did not pretend destructive behavior was acceptable simply because he wanted to be loving. He did not ignore hypocrisy or cover up harmful patterns. He confronted falsehood because genuine love is never built on pretending that lies are truth. Real love does not require you to participate in deception. So when someone gaslights you, repeatedly makes you feel guilty, changes your words, or attempts to make you question your own reality, remember the example of Jesus. Do not allow their emotional chaos to become your emotional chaos. Stay grounded. Speak plainly. Say what happened without exaggerating or attacking. You do not need to spend hours defending yourself to someone who is committed to misunderstanding you. You do not need to keep presenting evidence to someone who has already decided to distort it. You do not need to prove your innocence to someone whose goal is simply to keep you emotionally off balance. Your strength can be quiet. Your boundaries can be firm. And your words can still carry grace. Being courageous enough to identify toxic behavior does not make you less Christ-like. When done with wisdom and without a desire for revenge, standing firmly in truth can actually reflect the character of Jesus. Fourth, Jesus did not chase people who deliberately rejected him. When someone pulls away or suddenly becomes cold, your instinct may be to explain yourself, fix the misunderstanding, or chase closure. But Jesus modeled something different. When his disciples were rejected, he told them to leave and shake the dust from their feet. He offered truth and love, but he never forced anyone to accept him. Think about the wealthy young man who walked away after Jesus challenged him to surrender what controlled his heart. Jesus loved him, yet he did not chase him or weaken the truth just to keep him close. That teaches us something powerful. Love does not always mean holding on. Sometimes love means releasing someone. This matters when dealing with narcissistic patterns. They may create confusion, withdraw, return, provoke you, and keep you emotionally trapped in an endless cycle of explaining and apologizing. But you cannot love someone into changing when they have no desire to change. You do not need their approval to find closure. Sometimes closure comes from accepting what their repeated behavior has already revealed. Stop chasing. Stop over-explaining. Stop carrying guilt for choices that belong to someone else. You are not their savior, therapist, or rescuer. Speak truth, walk in love, protect your peace, and know when it is time to let go. Sometimes the most Christ-like choice is stepping back and allowing someone to face the consequences of their own decisions. Sometimes leaving is not an act of surrender. Sometimes walking away is exactly what obedience looks like. Jesus allowed Judas to leave the table. He allowed people to turn away when his teachings challenged them. He did not spend his life chasing after Pilate, the Pharisees, or anyone else who rejected the truth he carried. His mission remained more important than being understood or accepted by everyone around him. Even when Jesus was betrayed, misunderstood, abandoned, and left alone, he stayed faithful to his purpose. You can do the same, not from bitterness, but from courage, not from pride, but from peace. When someone rejects you because you refuse to compromise truth, you do not have to chase them. Jesus taught his disciples to shake the dust from their feet and move forward. Fifth, Jesus showed deep compassion without becoming codependent. He cared for the suffering, the sick, and the rejected, but he never allowed someone else's dysfunction to become his responsibility. At Bethesda, Jesus asked a man who had suffered for 38 years if he wanted to be healed. He offered transformation without forcing it.